sign-in sheet go around?
I haven't seen this. Robert, did you send around a sign-in?
I think it ended up with Jack.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's right here, yeah.
Oh. Thank you.
Bye.
Be careful.
Don't know what that would be.
Yeah.
Be careful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you everyone for coming. We do have a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order for the Temporary Advisory Committee on District Discipline. Today is Thursday, June 6th. And I don't see anyone for public comment, so I think we can skip there. Did everyone have a chance to read the minutes from the last meeting? Is there a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. The next is, under old business, is temporary advisory committee goals. I just like to keep them on there so we can all just kind of keep it in our heads, like, what's the end goal of this process, what we like to do. It's nothing that we really need to go over, but you'll see some of the things that are under new business kind of tie directly into that, some resources that we can use and things like that. The next is the equity audit discipline data. I put that request in with Dr. Duva. He did respond to me today that he is working on it. He has not gotten me that information, but he hopes to have it soon, from my understanding. So as soon as he has that, I will distribute that to the committee so we can start reviewing it. And then next is the SEL as a leader for equity and excellence, and I'll let Dr. Santa speak about that. She sent this in to me and thought it might be a good tool for us to use, and I think she's going to have some things up on the screen for everyone to kind of see.
So I just thought, what was interesting is they had a district framework, just to talk about building foundational support and plan. I don't think I'm not gonna go through every little single thing, but I thought it was just an interesting, cause it gave us, I think where I struggle sometimes is what should it look like, what does our framework should look like, how does the structure should look like? And I felt like this had a nice idea because it was meant for districts. So it talked about how to organize, how do you develop a shared vision and plan. It talked about like what the different activities were, how to communicate, organization. So each one of these little components had some really nice information. I think that I thought this part was particularly interesting about central office, what are professional learning, what are adult culture competences, staff trust, community, and efficacy. I think these were all really nice components that we could look at as part of our building up of our policies, and really looking at more that restorative justice type framework versus the typical punishment type framework, and really looking at consequences. And what we've been talking with teams quite a bit is when we say consequence, when we're talking about behavior, antecedent behavior, consequence isn't punishment. We think of consequence as punishment, but it's not. Consequence is a direct relationship to the behavior. And some consequences are positive and some are not. So really looking at what does that look like as a district? What's our philosophy of how do we keep kids engaged? And how does that impact the policies that we write? Does that make sense? So that's what this was all about. It did talk about, it does have the standards for students. It had, and I really like talking about reflecting on data, so we're continuously improving. So the framework seemed to me to be a nice structure. It doesn't talk about exactly the policy, but it gave us a nice framework in which to kind of talk.
Right. And one of the goals is to look at professional development and going with that. So does that have recommendations?
Yeah, so it did have, let's see, it had rubrics for us to look at. Things
I
like
some of their I looked at the website, but they had really good surveys for beliefs and actions.
Correct. Yeah, I thought those are great.
Yeah.
That's some really now. I'll show you some more resources. It's been a while since I looked at this, but there were things about anti-bias, arts, alternative suspension. What do the adults need? I just found like there was some stuff here that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. These are all things that have been already kind of vetted and are based on the CASEL standards. The CASEL standards are the social emotional learning standards. So, and the ones that we use. So I thought this was awesome. Let's see what other else. Let me show you other resources they had. I saw the anti-bias one. I thought that was very interesting. This was interesting. Board policies, yep. And I found the SEL toolkit for school boards to be very interesting. So there just was a lot of content on this particular website. And I'm also always a fan when it's free.
Yes.
Right, so this was kind of interesting too. So I just thought this might help. I actually think I got this and I registered for it. I just got us out of there, sorry about that. Anything that other people saw that you want me to show? There's some about equity resources too. There's some really good articles too.
Yeah, I like glanced at it yesterday and then today
Mhm.
too, and I liked the way that it gave everyone kind of a framework of like why we do these things, and also like the groundwork of having not just students, but the educators and staff looking at their own, like being able to reflect on their own upbringing and why they make the decisions they do, and being able to be thoughtful in that way. I thought they did a really nice job of like very purposefully looking at bias and like explicit bias and.
I think this would be great for building our professional development.
Yeah, like, and there's a lot in there too about looking at staff, and they broke it down into like, not direct care staff, but like teachers to management, et cetera. And then I really like their leadership beliefs and actions, and like being able to gauge why people feel the way they do.
I found, I didn't watch this entire thing, but this whole webinar regarding leveraging SEL to promote equity. We're always talking about cultural equity, so I thought that was very good too. And I also thought this would be a good foundation for PD for us. We don't always have to reinvent everything, we have it. There's some really good content.
No, I thought it was great because everything's, like you said, is kind of here, and a
Well-
lot of stuff is here together, so.
Well, and I liked, here's your organization framework, your implementation
Yeah.
framework, and improvement. I always like a structure, cause
Yeah.
otherwise I feel like a little bit, I don't wanna be aimless. I want us to have,
Right.
Yeah.
good
And on the
process.
website, what I like too, and they break it down to like the different, they had a bunch of different schools that partook in it. So
Yeah.
they have examples from like Minneapolis, Boston, Austin, Tulsa, and so you can really look at like examples specifically of what other places did, and a lot of it focuses on that staff development piece and training and kind of what went into making that framework, because I think looking at this, to me, I mean, and I just glanced, but it was pretty solid, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was based on really good content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree. So that's.
I like the part, because everything seems to be grounded that, districts have to engage students and families, that everybody has to be a
Yes.
partner
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
in order to make this work.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important
And I felt,
point that we have to get across.
I feel like that's what we heard from folks. I think we heard that from like Andrew when he was here before. I mean, he had a family emergency, so that's why he's not here, but he brought that up a lot, like how much
Right.
important it is to bring in the family.
Right.
And talking about that, and I felt that, I think that's probably why I started looking at this particular content of how do you do that? How do you do that meaningfully and not just you did it and said you did it. I don't know how I'm supposed to explain that, right?
To make sure that it's like
Superficially.
true engagement.
Yeah, and not superficial engagement.
Yeah.
And how do we engage kids, students in the process? I think it's important.
Yeah, I think they had, I think it was this, not Chicago, I like the Chicago Public Schools policy
Yes.
too. But on this one too, a lot of it tied back to like student advisory committees and like getting their insight and like after action plans and stuff, I thought was really important.
And I've seen where the students are the advisory board on discipline, like you can appeal your discipline to a board of students, which I've always liked that. Although sometimes you have to mitigate, cause the students were always sometimes harder on themselves than the teachers were. But those are always nice programs, cause then there's more ownership. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Community.
yep, community, yep.
Yeah, I know when in my high school, we had an honor code, and the students took it very seriously, because we were all engaged in it, and we had that kind of setup where there was, a student board that you could make an appeal to and present your case and bring witnesses and your friends and teachers and stuff like that to talk about, whatever occurred. But, yeah, so it's definitely something to think about, so thank you. And I think, if everybody wants to continue to look at this, and we'll kind of, use this as a resource for us. And if anybody sees anything that they really want to bring out, just let me know. We can always talk about it at a future meeting and go more in depth. But I just wanted to give a nice overview right now of things we can do.
And if you notice that each one of the areas is broken down into components too, which is nice, I think.
Right.
I really like that, like, student jury idea. Like, I feel like we should bring that up more. I don't know, that's like, I don't know, I just like that really, like, that's really good. I feel like, I don't know what else to say, but it just like, if we could figure out how to do that in like an actual, like, physical, like, figure it out, then that'd be cool.
Excellent.
I think you said something similar in one of the meetings, like, you didn't say it quite like that, but
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what you meant. Is there more that we can do that can be part of it? I don't remember if it was you that brought up like some concerns in the building and bringing up that concern and not necessarily being heard and things like that. So when you have these type of juries, that helps.
100%. Cause like sometimes we don't feel like we're being heard by like the administration and stuff. So if we're like heard by other students and we have other students like backing us up, we'll feel like we can like speak out more anyway, and so that'll like, I don't know, it'll just make everyone feel better, I guess. Not like fix all the problems ever, but like, you know what I mean.
Anybody else? All right. So we'll continue to look at this, and like I said, if there's any particular part that people want to bring out, just let me know. We can put it on a future agenda to discuss it more in depth, and we can start looking at, how they organize things and kind of the process that they use to that, and use that as a resource for us. The next is restorative justice models. Jen from the school committee sent us a number of things, and I'll let her speak about them just so that she can give an overview about what she sent in with some examples of policies and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, so basically all I did was try to find some schools that had implemented like a restorative justice model. And there were a few that seemed to be mentioned, like every time you Googled it, like, so I'm like, okay, they must be doing it well. And then there was another guide on like how to implement a restorative model in your school. So I had just sent those links. So the ones that seem to have a strong practice are Chicago and Oakland, and those were the two that I linked the actual policy. And then there were just some articles on like, the positive, like why you should implement restorative justice in your school and like ways to do it. And so I just thought that was good, because one of the goals of this is to see like what other districts are doing well in that area and how we can incorporate it here in our school. So those are just some things to look at to pull information from.
Do you want me to put any one of these up?
Yeah, you wanna do the Oakland one?
Yeah, because I don't think there's a link for.
I think in the past there were pockets of restorative justice.
Yes.
PD started and then it kind of just fizzled.
And I think like we talked at the last meeting about how the word matrix kind of gives people the heebie-jeebies in this district. I feel like the phrase restorative justice does the same thing. So I think that kind of needs to be like addressed also if we're gonna be able to move forward with it. Because I feel like, and I don't know the reasons for it, but I know that every time that word comes up, people are like, oh, I don't know about that. So that's, I think, an obstacle that we should be prepared to, get around as we move towards that.
When you talk about it, the response is, yeah, we did that.
Yeah, we tried that.
Yeah,
It didn't work. We
Yeah.
tried it.
Yeah, no, I don't really think so.
No, like I said,
maybe.
I felt like it was pockets, like I was not part of it, I just knew I'd heard of it,
Right.
but I wasn't involved at all. It never made its way all the way through the district.
So we didn't really do it
getting-
then.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what,
Yeah.
It started and it didn't.
Yeah.
yeah, yep. We did talk about with mental health folks, and they're like, no, they like this model. We do have some new people in there, but they did like a lot of the content, but I don't think, if they need help in, you can't just have
Implementation.
one little group doing it. It has to be everybody getting on board, and we're all gonna implement it, or it's not gonna work. It's too big of a
It's a
job.
mind,
And
like
it's
a
a big
mind
mind
shift.
Yeah.
It's a
And it-
complete mind shift.
It's a big mind shift, especially like things here in the past have been very tightly like regimented in terms of discipline, like you do X and Y happens and that's the way it works, and you do X and then, you know, consequence is bad, consequence is not a logical, like in my family, like we always talked about like logical consequences, like good or bad, like an action creates a logical consequence. So that's kind of like what this is, and I think it's that mind shift of getting people to like buy into this will be good. It's just kind of, and I think seeing that there are other very large districts that have been able to successfully implement this and see positive benefits from it, like not just implement it, but have it, you know, positive impact for the students, positive impact for the culture in the school. It's definitely something I think that needs to be considered, but it has to be something that, you know, is not, it's not something that it's not like maybe some other traditional things where you roll it out here and then you roll it out, like it all has to be like, everybody's kind of.
Everyone has to be on the same page. It also was a buzzword for a while, and I think a lot of people maybe have done an hour training on restorative justice and are like, I know it, but really like there's so much more when you look at restorative justice, and it's almost retraining everyone at the same time, to be able to like fully grasp like what is the purpose of it, right? And it's not just to punish, right? And why are we doing things the way we're doing them? And I think like back in like over 10 years ago, I used to like my old job, we were trying to do restorative justice. We did like an hour training, and they were like, all right, we're trained. We're like, we're not trained. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we know the definition now, and like, but like, why are we doing this? There was no discussion of why, right? So I think people need to feel like they're part of like the development of it.
Mm-hmm. And kind of to piggyback off of that idea, more related to academics in my situations, but I spent a lot of time in CPT time, common planning times this year, just being new in the school and the district, wanting to get a real pulse on what the need was. And relative to any initiative, I heard a resounding, like, it's not that we're resistant to the initiative, it's just we really wanna have grounded, ongoing PD to make sure. So I think that anytime discipline has come up, I've heard like yeah, that sounds awesome, but just show us how and tell us the why and make sure we have continued PD, not just kind of like, and I get it, like our schedules are all wild and how are we gonna put it all together, but I do think if we have a mindful plan and rollout and revisit and whatnot, I think it would be received pretty well. Because we do hear like, what can we do to address some of these things?
And even like working groups, when you roll out a policy, roll out the procedures, but then you roll out groups that problem solve and look at incidents and pick them apart and be able to explain to others why the decisions were made, and that's kind of how they learn. And like understanding it's going to be a learning curve, right? And there's no matrix you can make that says X equals Y. It's really looking at like the impact of the action, the impact on others, and then how do we repair that action? And again, that's never going to be suspension for one day for this behavior, right? And that makes a lot of people uneasy.
Yeah, that's what it says right here, like exactly what you're saying. What's the difference? What was the harm? What are the needs of everyone involved? And what are the obligations to address the needs and repair the relationships? Who are the stakeholders need to come together for that dialogue? It's very different than, okay, what's the punishment?
Right.
To me, punishment is very much an external control that doesn't really work. I mean, if it worked, then we wouldn't have recidivism in prison,
I was
right?
gonna say prisons would be empty.
Prisons would be not existing, it doesn't work. But we know when anyone, we all learn how to have internal control, and we make decisions based on understanding, I don't want to hurt myself or other folks, or I'm not gonna do that because I don't want to. When you have that more internal control, that changes the behavior for long term. Excuse me.
And I think for a lot of people too with restorative justice, they get anxiety because they view things as, am I doing it right or wrong?
Yeah.
Right? And so is this decision I'm making for the student, is it going to be viewed as right or is it going to be viewed as wrong? And that black and white is what and restorative justice is not black and white, right? It's gray. And so like getting people to be okay with understanding that you're going to have to work through some of these issues that will come up are going to be really challenging, and it's okay if it's learning, right? And there's not going to be a yes or a no or a right or a wrong. And I think, but a lot of times people are like want the answer real quick, and
They want you to do something. Do something about it, and I think it's going to be a mind shift for our families too, right? Because what happened? This happened to my kid. What are you going to do about that other kid?
Yes.
But giving people those strategies to say, first off, let's reflect on this. What were you doing during this time? 'Cause
Right.
tomorrow, when you do it again, you're gonna get the same result, even though the kid got a consequence. So what can you be doing differently? And I think that's where the don't know
Yeah.
comes in, so we just
Right.
keep doing what we do know. And I'm gonna keep doing this, and every time the kid goes wrong, I'm gonna make it your problem. Well, can we stop making it my problem and looking at it differently, like what could we change before it happens?
Right.
And I think that's where the struggle is sometimes people don't even wanna take that step and don't wanna be part of it.
Right. Yeah, to those points, it's like these are incredibly mature and critical skills that like most adults even don't have a handle on, you know, it's like, so I think if we remember, to your point, that it's gray and it can be uncomfortable and scary, and sometimes our desire to go towards the current system is because it's easier to avoid some
I
of the
live
more
with that.
challenging reflections. Nobody wants to reflect first. It's a lot easier to be like, you were wrong and now do this, so I feel justified, rather than coming to an understanding of how something transpired.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you look at this, and then you look at, like, for example, the policy from Chicago, it starts off with saying like the purpose, and then the rights and responsibilities, and it breaks it down to student rights, student responsibilities, parent rights, parent
Mhm.
responsibilities,
I like that.
and
I
like
like that.
school staff, and then the requirements, and it really has this really nice, I think, one page of why they're doing things the way they're doing them. So even like parents can understand, like, we're here to redirect and correct, intervene, gather, like,
Yeah.
and so if we had some sort of, I don't know, you'd have to have an introduction to I think the whole district as, you know, different groups, like parents, educators,
Yeah.
students.
At the high school, we've been working on, this is in its infancy stages, but like protocols and norms around reporting concerns from anybody, but whether that's a parent reporting or a student reporting or a teacher, and how to properly kind of proceed. But especially once, if it's called for, a meeting is in session to say, here's how we're treating each other, no matter how difficult the conversation is, and if anybody kind of infringes on that or, you know, doesn't respect those boundaries, we're gonna respectfully ask that this meeting is ended and rescheduled until we can have a healthy conversation. And, you know, it's just now coming to the forefront of what we're going to ask everybody to do starting at the beginning of next year, but I think like tiny little steps and just like setting the groundwork of how do we speak to each other as human beings, and that includes to students, like we're not assuming just because our students are younger that they're not human beings with their perspective, you know, it's like everybody in the room has to feel comfortable, even though it's not always comfortable, if you will, to have some of these discussions. Or safe, I should say, they should feel safe having uncomfortable discussions.
And you're modeling that behavior not only for the students, but for the parents when you set
Yes.
the groundwork, you know, moving forward.
Yeah, yeah.
I definitely think, you know, it's gonna have to be a long-term professional development series. My children's school district where we came from before we moved here, they had just rolled out restorative justice district-wide and were implemented, and I think one of the biggest struggles initially that some of the teachers had, especially in like the lower grades, not necessarily at the high school, but how do we fit this into class time? How do we,
Yeah.
because we, you know, we're mandated to spend so many minutes
Yeah.
teaching everything,
How
you
do we
know,
get the
how do we
curriculum?
fit this in? And that was always a struggle at the beginning, it seemed. So, you know, I would be interested to go back to some of the teachers I still know from there and say, how's it going now?
Yeah.
What does it
Yeah.
look like? You know, that kind of thing. So, which I may reach out to some of them.
I also think there's a concern from this level regarding we need PD on this, PD on this, PD on this, PD on this, and when are you gonna?
Do
Yeah.
it.
Now the rights to read is done, which kind of diverted us for 2 years. But now there's still only so many days, and it can't be all day trainings on everything that we want. It's just not going.
Right.
It's not going to work well. So what are we gonna really dig into, and do a really good job?
Right.
And is there training that helps that have many things, like if we need to do cultural equity, which I think that's a great training, but does restorative justice also can encapsulate that? You know, is there a way that we could look at this as a global training and not a bunch of separate things that are gonna be completely not manageable? If that makes sense. Yeah, I know that's a concern.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Trying to get
Is
it all
it
done.
possible to like start in like one particular school, or, you know, kind of pilot something and then use those staff members, teachers, whomever, to kind of, you know, move on to the next school and kind of grow people that, you know, experts in.
And mentors almost.
Yeah.
Cause it's like hard to like change the system when like the system we have is like really like, I don't know, like we have to have like a certain amount of time to like teach or whatever, like we have to like work around stuff that we can't really change, that like isn't like really a problem, but like it's enough of a problem that we have to like try and figure it out. And so like, I don't know, it's just hard to like change the system, like in the way that we want to, so it's not gonna be like as straightforward as we think it is.
So if you're doing like a student jury, when does that happen?
Exactly. Like, I don't,
Yeah, right, right.
cause I wouldn't know one,
Is
I'm
that
not
after
like a
school,
teacher or
is that not?
anything,
Yeah.
but like I
Yeah.
also would know, 'cause it's like, just hard to like,
Fit everything in.
yeah.
Doesn't mean it can't be done, but it does make it more trickier, right?
Yeah. But the pilot program may not be a bad idea, at least to get started, so there are some people who, like you said, can act as mentors and bring that along and, you know, cause right now it seems to be like, at least by grade levels, like all the elementary schools have kind of adopted the same code right now, or discipline policy, I would say. And the middle schools have theirs, and then the high school has theirs, so it's already divided up that way. But maybe we pick just like one or two schools to start it with, and, I mean, obviously the high school's gonna be different because of maturity and
Yeah,
things like
right.
that, so that's a whole different animal.
Mm-hmm.
But for the lower levels, might be good, it's not a bad idea.
You know, the other thing is like we're making the shift now and making the shift with the existing students and the existing staff is the difficult part. But once the system is actually in place, all the new people coming in it'll be easier, and it's a change that'll be making positive impact down the road. So it's difficult, but it's difficult for everybody in the room here. Like, it won't be difficult for people 5 years from now, because they will just naturally come in and be like, oh, that's awesome, y'all do restorative justice.
Sounds like safety care.
Yeah.
So we did train the trainer for safety care. Joe's one of the trainers. Obviously, I'm one of the trainers. I've done that for a long time. But we've trained, over 90, almost 100 people in the district, and it worked really well. I felt like that because we were having the same consistent message. And if we did a trainer model
Made
for
it
this,
pretty real for
that
people.
worked. We made it pragmatic.
You did.
We were honest.
I gotta say, like, I know
That was helpful. I
I'm
thought.
making comments from over here, but I've taken the training before, and it's a great training, but the way you two did it was so impactful, and we all kinda like talked about it, those, you know, within my purview, about how the way you both approached it and real world experience, and, you know, the whole thing was, it really stuck with me, and I felt like it was one of the PDs in my personal experience that I walked away feeling like I feel equipped to handle this, and if I don't, I know who to reach out to. It was really good.
So
You
I
guys did a
think
great
that
job.
type of model could help with restorative justice. If you get people who are really well trained in that and can be pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because
It'll be
a
helpful.
lot of it talks about, so if we were to break up if I were to break up that course into 3 sections, the first section is kind of like why you're getting behavior the way it is.
Mhm.
What is your triggers, action step, kind of going a little bit of the science and stuff. What are you looking for? What is our reaction to that? Then there's the actual strategies to use. And then the third part is the physical piece, which, I mean, we don't even have to talk about it. It just comes part of if you're gonna get that full cert. But a lot, trying to explain to people, like, sometimes this is happening for a very specific reason that you're not even aware of, and making people aware of what they're doing, part of it. So there's that piece. It's that two-way, like, what is the kid doing, but what are you doing as well? And then there's strategies on how to work with it. And, you know, it's not just, oh, we'll just tell them this and they're gonna have that happen. Like, that's great. Again, go back to that model, but really trying to pull pieces to it so it can be helpful. So, like, what's a strategy you can use next time so that, and then that kind of ties into your restorative piece. Like, okay, what can we do next time? What is a good idea? Sometimes you even ask the kids, so what do you think should happen when we do this? And you start making them part of the conversation, as opposed to, I say you do, you don't do, no, I say something else, and you were gonna go back and forth.
And that, Joe, is a lot of like having gone through like last year's discipline data, it's a lot of that. Like, I tell you to pick your head up and look at me, and you say no, and I say you have to, and you say I'm not doing it, and then like we're going back and forth, and like it doesn't have to like end up like that.
This is the hill I wanna die on.
Yes, exactly.
And then they're being written up for being insubordinate.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly.
But
Yeah,
if,
okay,
unless we
got it.
change And I think at 3 of the 5 sessions that we did, someone said, wow, this is like changing this is changing a mindset.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what it is, I think, yeah.
And people came, like, it said it out loud, like, wow, some people even said, you're gonna have a difficult time doing this, and I said, okay, but I could show you ways to make your day easier. You know, you're gonna have the same thing, but I'm like, if I could do it with the most difficult people and get success, you guys have cupcakes compared to some of the kids that I work with, so this really should be easy to do. You know,
Easier
to
Easier.
do. But you can make it harder on yourself because you don't know. I think it's sometimes people just don't know what else to do.
Yes, yeah.
This didn't happen in my house. Oh, okay, this is not your house. This is not your classroom.
These are not your circumstances.
This is what it was. So getting people to not have, and I always say, if you get into training, if you only have a hammer in your toolbox, you only fix things with a hammer. We're gonna show you some other things to do, an array of things that you might try. It's not just one other strategy, it's gonna be like 5 or 6, and then you might go from this to that to this to that. But if you're not aware of those other things, then you just keep doing what it is you're doing. And if you have that matrix that I twitch about, is because, well, the kid got sent to the office 3rd time, we automatically have to do this, and you got a teacher who's reading the handbook saying, nope, he's supposed to be sentenced 3rd time, and you're just, okay, but we're not fixing the problem, we're just abiding by
Yep.
a drop-down menu of, so to speak, because I had that in a previous district, and I'm like, but we're not solving anything.
Right.
We're following policy,
Right.
but that's not getting us anywhere.
Right.
Well, then you find like that the kid that's truant is really because they're babysitting their
Right.
siblings at night while their parent was working, and then they're getting the kids ready for school while they're trying to get ready for school. We can figure out a lot of those things, and we talk about that in training quite a bit. And thinking about, you know, how do you address this? How do you talk to kids? How do you just change how you're, the mindset of how you're working with kids?
Right.
Yeah.
And they're not there. A lot of times it's the ego of the adult that's gotten in the way. If they didn't do what I said they're gonna do, you know, you really have to put that aside.
And
They
sometimes,
did to make me mad, right?
yeah, sometimes it doesn't always have to be true professional development. I say this, like, I wish I was able to do this while teaching, was when I became an administrator. Now I'm going in classroom to classroom to do evals or just be in classrooms to see what's going on. But I'm getting teachers, I'm watching them teach a lesson or something that I tried teaching and didn't get that much success, but I wish I had just that opportunity to see that. Same thing with discipline. Hey, so-and-so across the hall has this kid, or had them last year, or has them for gym, and they get success and I am not. Like, we don't ever just reach out. That's not a huge professional development, but just have the opportunity to kind of just go professionally between classrooms, or, you know, it's 2 5th grade science classes going on. They might look very different depending on the teacher, but one never has the time to observe the other to say, oh, that's a really good idea, whether it's the lesson or with discipline. So I mean, some of those things can just be done in a very, not taking up a whole day of professional development, but just a 20-minute feedback with other peers.
And even that's where like the mentoring and even the shadowing comes into play. Like when I like, over 10 years ago was a clinician in an adolescent girl group home, and we would stand up and do training on how to, manage behaviors in the group home. But so they would sit for an hour training, but when they really learned was when you were on the floor with them.
Yes.
Right? And they were able to see how you interacted, how you modeled, how you de-escalated, how you acknowledged that individual and how they were struggling and how. And so I think, and I imagine it's a lot harder in an educational setting, but like sometimes like being able to see those who are confident and see it work, and understand too that there are times, like a lot of times, like one of you said it, like adult egos get in the way, is restorative justice really acknowledges like whatever trauma or whatever else factors are going in the kid and allows them to be part of the solution, right? And the kid takes ownership in the solution and kind of learns for it. Because again, if you tell a kid a kid's supposed to listen, and so you yell at him, you need to listen, why do you need to listen? Because you need to, it's the rule. And instead of being like, well, why are you having trouble listening? What are the barriers to you being able to attend in class? And how can I help you overcome some of those barriers so you are successful in my classroom, instead of like, you just listen because you're in class. And so I think a lot of times too, and that again leads to an outcome that's not always black and white. And it's getting people to be okay with that and understanding there's not always going to be a yes or a no, and what works for Tom is not gonna work for Jack.
Mhm.
Right,
And that's okay, cause
Yep.
matrix don't work, cause all of us aren't the same humans.
right.
One thing I loved that, to your point, that they had said in the training was, and it's funny because until something sometimes is said out loud to you, you don't even like realize how simple the solution can be. But you guys had said like, ask yourself first, are basic needs being met? Did this kid eat? Did they sleep last night? Do they have access to a shower and clean water? Did they have a place to do homework at home? Like sometimes asking yourself that first can really mitigate the, well, they're doing this to me on purpose. Yeah, maybe they don't even realize they're doing this to get some kind of attention or something from you. You know, so that was really impactful for me. Like when we talk about the mind shift, it's like we're allowed to ask ourselves, wait a second, let's just like go through our checklist before we assume worst intentions.
Right.
And I think that's gonna take, you know, cause I think a lot of, and myself included, when I was in the classroom, it's like if an administrator walked in my room or another teacher walked in my room and I taught chorus, so I would have 80 to 100 kids in front of me at one time and you know, it's gross. The question is, like, oh my God, are they judging if this kid is paying attention or not, or, you know, and then you feel responsible for wrangling rather than realizing, like, wait a second, this is, you know, so sometimes just in my experience, like teachers hearing, you are allowed to do this, or like, this doesn't mean you're a bad educator, you don't have control over your classroom, like that mind shift, I think, is gonna be so important.
Yep.
But really impactful,
Yeah,
you know.
So, I mean, there is that too. We did hear a lot of that for some people, like, well, what if it's an evaluation year and the kid had his head down? I'm like, I really don't think, as an administrator, like, I'm going to jump on that one little piece as the defining moment of your evaluation. So it is sometimes reassuring teachers, like, hey, this is okay. And if they are doing such negative behaviors, you should probably be bringing this to a team anyway,
Yeah.
so more eyes can be on it. But I do think people hopefully putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to be better at what we do. But sometimes by doing that outcome, we're missing some of the obvious things that could be. So I'm, you know, because I've heard people say, well, what's my administrator gonna think? And I'm like, they're gonna get the same training.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they're-
that came up
several times.
all the time in
Yeah.
our training.
Yeah,
This
like
happened
what-
to me the other day.
It was, what is our administrator gonna think? And, well, our administrator doesn't say that. I'm like, well, your administrator hasn't gotten trained, and now I think some have.
Well, you have some of our administrators as trainers, that was purposeful.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to know that, like, this is right now okay.
Yes.
So, and it took a lot of that takes
Reassurance.
trust,
yeah.
and that takes time as well. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of that side. And if you don't have that, and I don't know, and every building's different, every administrator's different, but I've heard people say, that's not what my administrator would do. I'm like, well, they are now.
Yeah.
So that took some, that also shares the burden with staff, and, you know, and then it gets taken out, I think, on the students, which they don't even know they're doing it. But human behavior is like anything else. If you feel not trusted, you're anxious, your tolerance level is gonna be short, and it's just a little cycle, but people don't know that.
Yeah, this was literally last week. I did an observation and somebody was, you know, completely disconnected from the task, but not disturbing anybody. Just happened to be doing his own thing, and the teacher was very nervous and came to me after, like, you know, I can't believe you came in at that moment with this. And I said, actually, I think you did wonderful, and I know that specific student, and I am glad that you allowed them to still be there and be physical in the classroom as much as they can be, given what I know is going on, and you still moved forward with your class respectfully. I said, I actually thought you did a great job, and I thought a lot about what we learned in the training of, you know, this, what are we doing to make sure everybody is getting their unique needs? Like, to your point, like, a matrix is not gonna necessarily reflect. So I think it is that reassurance to them, like, I'm not walking in there judging you because this person with this set of circumstances is not necessarily where everybody else is at.
And I think a lot of our administrators feel judged because they wanna be in control of their building, and they're
Yeah.
so afraid that the building's gonna get out of control, that they go to these really kind of consequence, not punishment type models, cause then they can keep in control of the building. But that's sort of an illusion, right?
But it's the same thing
Yeah.
with, I've come across staff, well, if I don't address this, then they're all gonna do it. I'm like,
No, they're not.
no,
No, they're
no,
not.
I,
Now, 85% of them are not.
you know, that one other kid might wanna do it, maybe someone else will follow, and I'm sure those kids are redirectable, they say, nope, we're not doing that right now. But sometimes people have that in their head, and I'm like, okay, we'll label that's called anxiety, because you're trying to think of something beforehand, you're trying to hit something off, because if that happens, then if that, I'm like, when we start doing if statements, so if that's anxiety, let's reel that back, and sometimes people need that. Okay, so then what do I do? I'm like, well, when it happens, you address it, instead of always trying to think of what may happen, and we won't let it, because then if that happens and this happens, I'm like, no, let's not play that game. But some people don't know how to do that, so.
I think what I like about this, and kind of expand on what you said before, to have, many different tools in your toolbox, because not only does the teacher or administrator only have their experience, especially if they have their own children at home, but they've got 20 or more children in a classroom, and the kids' vision of discipline is probably 20 different versions of discipline of what they're used to dealing with. So you have to have all these extra tools and ways to come to an agreement and come to an understanding, so everybody understands what's happening, and do it in such an equitable way that it's fair to everyone, and everyone is involved and truly engaged in the process.
Well, but it's a process.
Right.
And what I also think kids do it, anybody, especially today's day and world, they're like, we're instant gratification. Especially teachers look at administrators like, I need you to solve this problem instantly. And it's like, great, give me 3 years, and this is how long this is going to take. Because that's how long it might take with that student, or just anything. But we feel like instantly, I as the administrator should have the answer because I'm an administrator. Or I'm sure people turn to you and it's like, fix this now, like this kid needs
It's
to.
like, oh, I didn't know you wanted me to be a brain surgeon and fix synapses
And so,
right now.
there's that, like, we did this yesterday, why is he doing it again today? And it's like,
Exactly.
because, we keep like, Rachel, I need help, like, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, you've
I'll,
done that.
I've come up with, we're trying to problem solve, but it's not instantly, it's like, okay, this is gonna take a few weeks or even a year to work with the student to get them to just do the next step.
Right.
But that's something that is also hard for people to understand.
And I think that goes to what I had mentioned before, to help teachers to understand, this is not, it doesn't have to take a lot of your classroom time and your teaching time to implement, because some of these things are gonna take a while to go through, and there's discussions that need to be had, and it doesn't have to all happen on one day. It can be spread across weeks, like you said, depending on what the issue is.
And we don't have to have cookie cutter classrooms, right?
Well, that's what
Every
I-
teacher can have their own expectations of,
Oh,
because
right.
the content area drives a lot of expectations sometimes, and it doesn't have to be like, this is how you handle everything cookie, it doesn't work, 'cause it's not
Right.
gonna work with the personality of the teacher or the makeup of that particular class.
But I think that's the important thing too, like,
You have to have that flexibility.
historically, like, school has been, everybody sits in a row and everybody looks straight ahead and everybody like, and that's not, we've learned that doesn't work, right? And so like you said, that student was in the class, wasn't disrupted, but they were there. Whatever they were absorbing, at least some of it was like getting it. And that's so much better just to let them be than to be like, you're not paying attention, look up at me, take your hood off, like all of that stuff just creates so much like, ugh, and then they end up getting sent out of the classroom, and then where does that go? Versus like, okay, I know you need to sit here and do this, and you're gonna wiggle back and forth like this, and you might need to get up, and like, I know that's not neat and orderly, but I think allowing those little things prevents some of these bigger, like, you're out of here, go down to the hallway. But that's a mind shift, and it's like you said, it's teaching like the people in the building that all happening is not chaos or out of control, like that's what
No,
a normal
that's
classroom
part,
looks like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I can give an example of like, I get a call, oh my God, so-and-so is doing this, and they're not doing what we're told, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God, they're in school today?
Right, you showed up.
Yay!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Win for the day, that's the only expectation for today. They're in school, and they're being safe.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
We had Joe and I had a conversation, when was it, a week and a half ago? Where we talked about, all you're worrying about now is not just safety, but what we're doing is reestablishing a boundary. That's it.
Yeah, well, I needed to make sure
She was
Yeah, I-
worried,
like, I
not
stress-
us, but with the kid, we're trying to, Joe, you're just reinforcing what the boundary is, that's it, safe, reinforcing the boundary. That's all they can handle right now,
Right.
cause they're running amok.
because there's a lot going on, but.
That's all we can handle, safety, reaffirm the.
But I needed reassurance from you, like, is what we're doing
Okay.
and are you okay with it? Like, and that's where we were, and like, I needed, okay, that.
And then he would, okay, okay, you know, 'cause
But I needed that mental check to be like, is what we're doing okay? And it is. It's like, okay, and then I go tell my staff, nope, what we're doing is what that girl needs right now. And this is, and then it's like reassures them, like, okay, yep, we're,
well, and Joe was worried about feeling like he was being mean.
I am being mean because everything I
I
give her,
said,
she
no, you're
breaks
reestablishing the boundary with the kid, you're not being mean,
Right,
and
right.
they need that.
That's,
He was
and that's, again, that's where
So,
that
but it's
person was at.
permission to do that, but if someone else walked into the situation and saw it, they might have a very different interpretation of what they're seeing.
Right.
Right, and that's why we were talking, so I think more that is really important, not with me, but like
Just-
with
just-
each
Yeah, but that's why
other.
everybody has to buy in.
With
But like
each
for
other.
that,
Right.
for
Above,
that class
below,
that
around,
Jackie
everybody.
had,
But this is why DA is working.
Yeah.
Right, because,
it's like Kenny, oh, it's really quiet.
no,
Five
I'm not
minutes later, I was like,
I'm not saying that, I know it's good,
Okay.
we're good, but that's why, because,
But that teacher
We
also
talk
was
about
great that
this.
Jackie observed, like, okay, that could have impacted her score, or it could have changed, or she could have handled that. Was there negative, like, when you look at the evaluation, was there negative behavior going on? To me, that's not negative behavior.
Right.
That impacts, and that kid was, maybe they were listening, maybe they were or they weren't, but I got kids that could stare at a board who probably aren't listening, even
Right,
though they look like
exactly.
they are, just because they're there. But I think it's important for that teacher to be reassured that, hey, great job keeping that kid in the classroom and managing the rest of the class. To do it reassures that teacher, like, okay, then when that happens tomorrow, we're gonna stay this course, and that's okay.
Yep.
But that needs to be, that's,
the message
The
needs to
message.
be, it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and that has to be consistent through everybody, yeah, and that's gonna take time, but I think, you know, it sounds like we're, like, at least people in this room are like in agreement, like, and I think that it's, you
Yeah.
know, and it sounds like in little pockets it's being, you know, so it's just a matter of figuring out how to,
Come up with something.
And what does that policy look like, and
Right.
how, I think we're gonna be careful about how is the policy implemented, cause not everything can be done all at once.
Yeah.
So I think when we are thinking about that, how can we do that so it honors the process that has to happen in order to make this do it well, versus this is the policy, and now that's the policy, you better follow it as of now. I don't think that's going, it's not gonna work. It needs to be like a
You need like stage one,
Stage
two,
one,
three.
stage
Right.
two, this is the expectation, and I like that language, is the expectation, not you gotta, you know, I think that's what we're gonna be really careful with.
One of these
Otherwise, we're gonna
had
send
a,
our people right over the edge, right, so.
had
just-
like a how to roll it out in your school, yeah, like, which was helpful.
Yep.
And again, that's why I like that framework where they're talking about vision, which is kind of where we're at now, right, and then what's the implementation look like, and
Right.
how long does that
Yeah.
usually take? We know anything really new takes 3 to 5 years to
Yeah.
implement, it's just the way, especially if it's a system-wide change,
Right.
it
And
just takes that.
sometimes too, when you're looking at like changing like mindset and like framework is like looking at like the end of the day, is the goal for everyone to be straight ahead listening, or is it for everyone in your classroom was safe? And like if everyone hears that like now at the end of the day, what we care about is safety. Were they emotionally safe? Were they physically safe? Were they safe in our school? And like if just implementing little like subtle changes and like when you make a vision is like really adhering to that. And I think people are much more likely to not be so anxious if they're like, well, this person wasn't late in my class. No, I had a good day. Everyone in my classroom was safe. They were physically safe. They were emotionally safe.
Mhm.
We had a great
Yep,
day.
yeah.
Not every, you know, even though Johnny was staring at the wall in the corner, but he was safe and he was probably listening in the way he could.
Probably one of my worst situations that I've gotten to, not in this district, and it was a while ago, started with nothing. It was an elementary kid, they were upset about something, they put their head down on the table, the teacher was upset that their head was on their table and not participating, it was something like, oh, I'm gonna lose face, I think it was the quote, I'm losing face because I'm
And all the
allowing
kids are gonna
them,
do it.
and all the kids, I have all the kids are participating, but that one kid isn't, and I'm losing face because that kid isn't doing what I told him to do, and they sat there in this big, long thing back and forth, then it ended up in a physical restraint. Right?
Oh my God.
And I'm going, okay, so now you're sitting in front of, now pretend that you're sitting in front of a judge, right? Please, I use this as an example in training. Please explain how this situation happened, and when you peel it all back, it started with the kid wasn't doing anything. Yikes, you know, and if you just left them alone and not be yacked at them, they probably would have been okay. They would have come back in about 5 to 10 minutes. We know that kid.
Yeah.
But they just could not get over that the kid had their head on the table. So we didn't, I mean, that person didn't get punished or anything consequence from the district, but we sat and talked about, let's peel this back. What does that look like? What could have been done a little bit differently? Cause it's kind of disturbing that this case ended in
It's the
this.
same, I've had that conversation with teachers who are worried about, well, you know, the kid has his head down or he's not doing what he's supposed to, so that's gonna impact our test scores. I'm like, but so sending the kid out of the class to go to the office, how, isn't that the same result?
Yeah.
But they couldn't see that.
Yeah.
And, but it was like, okay, the kid's in the class not doing anything, it's impacting your test score. Sending the kid out legitimately because the kid didn't have a pencil, got written up for being disrespectful, gets sent to the office, and I'm like, so what are you solving? You just now then who wasn't even being a behavior, but he got written up for being disrespectful, for not having a pencil in class and being prepared, and I'm like, solve the problem. Give the kid, you bought the teacher a whole box of pencils, here you go. He didn't like that. But I'm like, you did the same, you're getting the same results if we're worried about the test score. But but not everyone can, like you said, like, let's peel this back to how did it start? It started with the kid was doing nothing, okay? That's,
I do
I would-
think that
go ahead.
it's very
No, no.
important that message that you're sending is very much, you know, I am a teacher, I've been a specialist, I've been a classroom teacher. And there is a lot of pressure that you put on yourself when you're on evaluation year, regardless of, you know, and I'm also a member of the district evaluation committee, and I think that it would be important for this group to talk to that group, or I'd be happy to, you know, kind of deliver the message, but because when you read the rubrics
Yeah,
that we're scored on,
virtually all kids are engaged.
yes, and you know,
well,
and
if you read
it-
the rubrics,
you know,
with the population I have and with the numbers that I have,
no,
my
it's-
teachers wouldn't be as effective as they were, but I'm like, I have to look at this differently because of
right.
who they're teaching and how many kids they're
Right.
teaching.
But, and, you know, and I'm gonna just say it out loud, not every administrator does that. You know, there are administrators that look at the rubric and they'll say, hey, Sue, you know, I'm really sorry, but this is what I saw. And so I think if we're gonna change that, we have to change the evaluation.
There's some problems with it. It definitely can't be applied to a lot of our special educators. There's no way that my nonverbal kid with autism is gonna just
Turn and talk.
spontaneously turn and talk to another student.
Right.
And so they can't ever get a 3,
Right.
Right.
not even a
Yeah.
4. So what we've done, and I don't know if you're aware, is I've gone in and done additional observations because I feel I can interpret what that would look like with that population of kids. And in this case of that particular one kid did turn over and go tap the kid's work. That's spontaneously turning and communicating for, you know, but it's not a fair system in a lot of ways, and it
No.
doesn't go across all teachers for typical teaching. You have to interpret it.
I wanna be
It's crazy.
mindful of the time, cause I know a number of us have to get to
People
democracy
have to
night.
go.
I
So,
have to help them set
so,
up, so I don't.
I encourage
Is
everyone
that
to.
for tonight?
Look, so, look at the policies that we were sent, look at the stuff from Castle and kind of really start digging into it, and if, like I said, things you wanna focus on, areas you wanna look at, next steps you think we should take, forward them to me and Rachel, we'll put them on a future agenda, we can start really digging into
And
it.
you find anything that you like, we can send links to.
Right, absolutely,
Absolutely. And the
Right.
notes are gonna be scarce, cause I couldn't type and
Yeah,
on my
that's
computer.
fine, that's
But I'm
fine.
just gonna do big bullets, and we really appreciate your voices.
Yes, absolutely, thank you,
Coming,
thank you.
appreciate it.
Is there a motion
No,
to
we
adjourn?
really, really do.
All right,
Cause you're gonna be
second.
on the restorative
I
justice
second.
You got
jury.
it? All right, all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.